Here we have to, as an academic, I have to reference work. So this is reference to the work of Dane Rudhyar, the pioneering theosophist and astrologer of the 1930s to 80s. And he looked at all planetary cycles as analogous to the sun-moon cycle. So in the sun-moon cycle, sun and moon come together in a new moon. They move apart in a first 90-degree aspect, move into the full moon, and then there's the waning phase, the closing phase, with the final square aspect, and then they come back to new. So there's, if you like, a life and growth phase, and then a death and decline phase. So if you convert that metaphor to the Uranus-Pluto cycle, then the square of 1933 was the closing phase of the cycle. So Rudhyar said this is winter. Winter is coming. The leaves are falling off the trees. The upcoming square he would describe as a new blossom. The buds, the blossoms are about to come forth. And so in the closing phase, the winter phase, you are obliged to cope with cleaning up the mistakes that have been made in the previous cycle. When you come to the new opening cycle, well, there is growth, there's new material. You actually have more of a chance, as Kepler would have put it, to interfere in the historical process and create something new. I think Jung's perspective on this is incredibly important, because we've got Johann Kepler, who dealt with the outer level, if you like, the need for political reform. Jung's attitude was that inner transformation has to accompany political reform, otherwise the political reform doesn't work. So Jung's perspective on the present time was informed by a slightly bigger understanding of the gradual shift of the constellations, the gradual movement of the constellation Aquarius to the rising point on March 21st, the spring equinox. And Jung's perspective on that was that humanity will gradually take responsibility for its own responsibility. Humanity will gradually take responsibility for its own spiritual condition. So he was a profoundly religious man. He was not anticipating the coming of atheism, as some people do, and the end of religion. His perspective was that we would cease relying on an authoritarian Father God and instead understand that the divine is within us, and therefore we can take responsibility for our relationship with the cosmos rather than being buffeted by it, pulled this way and that by it. So Jung's attitude is also one of liberation in relation to astrology. So instead of anticipating an upcoming astrological alignment like the next Uranus-Pluto square and just making predictions saying there's going to be trouble, Jung would say, well, the trouble only happens if we are unaware of our own motivations. And if we can become aware of our own motivations, well, the trouble doesn't happen. And then Kepler's idea of forming a peace movement becomes more possible. Until the 1960s, technology was always considered a good thing. Technological progress was always considered a good thing. And then we get a romantic reaction against technology and a strong return to ideas of the natural life. Now, so on the one hand, we had the rapid spread of nuclear power. On the other hand, strong movement of people going back to the land, the ideal of living off your own plot of land and so on. Now, the creative fusion of those 2 points is the whole ecological movement, renewable technology, and the idea that technology is not something to rebel against, but can be used for good if we work with nature. And so if we were to look at a speeding up of that process, which personally I hope we will, then it would be the rapid enhancement of the use of technology in harmony with nature. Now, on the big level, on the public level, we've got an energy crisis. Personally, I find it impossible to understand why the United States is now not entirely driven by wind and solar power, considering the huge open spaces there are. Oil dependence should have been dealt with a long time ago. But that's the big level. What's happening to us personally as human beings is something that is a little weird, with the use of stem cell research, nanobots, sort of minute machines that can enter our bodies and so on. That's something I actually find a little bit difficult to cope with because the rate of change is so fast. Now, with stem cell research, that's in its infancy, and all the scientists say we're going to take an embryonic human cell and just manipulate it for the good. But we know perfectly well that there are scientists who are planning to clone human being animal hybrids and grow them. I mean, this stuff exists in science fiction. It's inconceivable that someone somewhere isn't hoping they can do it. So there are huge ethical issues opening up, which unfortunately are polarized between scientists and Christian fundamentalists. But there's another huge debate which is going to happen about actually what it is to be human. The whole thing about being human is we experience ourselves as supremely self-conscious. We regard ourselves as more than just mere lumps of matter. But if you start creating matter, does that matter then become self-conscious? I mean, it's huge. The relationship between astrology and history is they're both studies of what happens when time passes. And history can draw on different methodologies. You can be an economic historian looking at statistics. You can be an oral historian asking people for their reminiscences of the Second World War or the Great Depression. Now, part of the astrologer's toolbox until the 17th century was the idea that historical periods can be understood through their relationship with planetary cycles. And historians until recently did use systems of dividing history up according to periods. Karl Marx did it, for example. And his work, although it's rather taken a dive in the last 20 years, was until 1990 extraordinarily influential. The idea that there are sequences of revolutions leading up to workers' revolution. Now, historians these days, all the young scholars have dropped such ideas of epochs, but there was a time when you get regular planetary cycles and you look at those in relation to epochs. And I'm by inclination a historian. I love the past. If people did something in the past, I love to play around with it. If they brewed up all sorts of food, I'd like to eat them. Drink mead. Instead of some modern cocktail. So I love the past. So for me, to try and enter the classical, the medieval, or Renaissance mindset it's an exciting thing to do. So if I'm a historian, I want to enter the mindset of a man like Johann Kepler in the 17th century, or Guido Bonatti in the 14th century, these great figures who were trying to look at how history unfolded in line with planetary cycles, not caused by planetary cycles, but in line with them, in like harmony with them.